write it and go find the money and then try to shop it, or do you know if you get a pickup? Or
we weren't really worried about the money. The earlier ones did just well enough internationally. I thought we could get the...
Yeah, it cost a lot to make it.
Yeah, just because they don't cost anything. So, yeah, we just went to Greece and proceeded. We were working on the script. We didn't really have a script until about 6 days before we... when you give your crew, your department heads and the producers get a script 6 days before you're shooting.
I remember the first AD, the guy who has to plan everything, who's worked with Rick a lot, his name is Vince. I remember we handed him in the script, but it was 6 days is generous. It was like the shooting started on Monday. We handed him the script on Thursday evening.
Yeah.
And he read it by Thursday night. We got dinner. He's like, hey, not bad.
Good on that.
What if he's quick? It'd be good.
I don't want to mislead everyone. We had a very detailed outline.
Which doesn't mean we'll have the financing.
No,
I spent my life working on my life.
But that's detailed outline. Detailed. I've even estimated how long I think every scene's going to be. That'll be about 13 minutes. That'll be about 30 minutes. So we had everything you need to pre-produce a movie. We just didn't have a script. So that didn't help us with the financing. But we pulled it together last.
But why Greece? How Greece ended up being the locale for this one?
I was yeah, that's as good a reason as any. I was going to scout a few. Well, it was a conceptual thing. At first, in the years building up to it, we talked about a lot of places. We talked about shooting in the U.S. It could have been anywhere when we were first.
West Coast, Spain, Italy.
Yeah, we talked about a lot of places. But about a year ago, I was going to go visit a few countries with this in mind, and it was Greece, Italy, Spain, I think. And I went to Greece, found the house, the writer's house, where they've been staying six weeks. And that was really the key location I was most nervous about, finding something that would feel like this old writer's house. And we found an old writer's house, and he just passed away this night.
Patrick Lee Fermer was a really beautiful travel writer.
Yeah,
British guy by way of Greece.
The Powell Pressburger from one of their last films together was called Ill Lit by Moonlight. And Dirk Bogart plays Patrick Lee Fermer. The guy, he's a kind of war hero.
To show you just how spot on Rick's brain is about locations, I had, when we did Before Sunset, one of the main locations was the Shakespeare Company bookstore, which, and my daughter, who at the time of Before Sunset was about 4 or 5, she came to Greece, and now she's 14, and she walked into Patrick Lee Fermer's house and said, does this remind you of the Shakespeare Company bookstore?
Stacks of books.
And
in a library.
There's some weird, spiritual door.
Well, definitely. You can have like a British expat cinematographer in your film.
Yeah. But to finish the question, so that location, found a few other places that most of the locations in the movie I saw in about a 2-day period. So I just canceled the rest of the trip. I just said, this is it. I was sitting.
Julie and I got an email saying, I see the movie.
This is it. I was like,
you were going to Greece.
So that's where that comes.
Well, what did you think when you saw these locations? I mean, did they feel like the right places to you?
Oh yeah, I loved it. I mean, at first I was a little nervous to go to Greece because I heard on the news that, economically, I was imagining, lots of Mancha kind of situation
where we couldn't get out when the rotation started.
No. We could get out, but we couldn't finish the film. I mean,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, I was worried, but in fact, when I got there, I was like, I fell in love with Greece almost immediately. So, I mean, I had been there before, but yeah. Yeah. Which wasn't, it was Hawke, but it wasn't an easy situation. So, I had strange memories of Athens being such a crazy place and stuff, but this time, I really loved it.
Is it a tough place to get a movie made, filming? Is Athens, is Greece a tough place to make movies?
No, actually, there's like a renaissance of film. I mean, they're going through a terrible economical turmoil, but it's like it seems.
There's no new way there cinematically. Athena Rahil Sangari was one of our co-producers. She did the film Attenborough and got a lot of international acclaim, and she helped us enormously.
It's one of the women at the dinner table scene.
Yeah, contemporary of our couple.
There's another couple across from Julie and I about the same age.
The negotiation thing, she was nice.
She hooked us up with a lot of those people. And
the writer, the guy who plays the writer, Walter, who won an Academy Award for
Tom Jones.
And well, for Zorba the Greek. Yeah. He came to Crete and never left.
Yeah, he's one of these guys, an 85-year-old guy making his acting debut. Never acted before, but had been around movies, so he was telling us kind of how to. He's looking at me, just.
Our first day of rehearsal with him, he said, Richard, can I speak plain?
They loved each other, Ethan.
He said, I'm worried about Ethan being believable as a writer. I'm not ready.
The way he dresses.
The way he dresses. A man of letters wouldn't never dress that.
And then he went into, like, talking about, what's that actor from this?
Charles Bronson.
Charles Bronson.
I shot a film with Charles Bronson. He was an author. He was in Muscles. It was totally unbelievable.
I was looking at Ethan fuming.
But this is our way. We just incorporate that into the movie. Okay, we're going to use that. That's funny. That's good.
I was actually on a film festival during Walter, so I know he talks of Blue Street, whether you want him to or not.
Yeah.
We call him on the radio.
He was funny.
With admiration.
Yes, whatever you say. Yes, sir.
But then he'd be doing his off camera, like say we're shooting Ethan, but he's doing his lines off camera, and he's really like, you have 7 minutes until the sun's behind the cloud. Not looking at the
Great DP, but new to acting.
Yeah, and he really thought he should be shooting the movie. I felt sorry for my DP.
Yeah.
But one of the fun things about the movies is they start off with you guys kind of, basically starts with a twosome, generally you guys, but then this one starts off with a twosome with you and the young actor playing your son. There's so much pain in that scene.
Well, part of that, the end of the second film is Julie and I, and Julie's doing this magical dance to Nina Simone, and you can see Jesse so in love. And I think I'm not wrong in assuming that most of the audience feels the way Jesse does and wants him to stay with her. So it seemed kind of appropriate to the three of us that we start the third film with the repercussions of following your heart. That as a grown-up, you can follow your bliss and you can, but there's these choices that you make and they have repercussions. And we wanted to start the third movie by looking straight in the eyes to the casualty of that decision.
Yeah, I mean, you miss that plane at the end of the, you're going to miss that plane, that's the last line, and fades to black. And this is what happens when you miss a plane and,
Your son was with me.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, because I was wondering about how you decided, or how you arrived at deciding to film the way you did. Because each of the films has a very different tone in terms of the way that they start. And I actually start with how you decided to start the second one at the bookstore, because you get an entrance, Julie. I mean, there's that sort of pan across to you. And I just wonder how that decision was made, because obviously you guys all work together.
Well, with this one we sort of teased it in because I think that's the question. If you've seen the previous two films, it's like, oh, are they together or not? So we don't really answer that question for the first 6 or 7 minutes. And then we find out in short order, oh, there's Celine, and oh, here's two twins. So you just jump right into their life. The other one, it's a surprise, even though we're in her hometown. There she is at the book signing.
But it's also a kind of a tease, too, because you set this kind of suspense into motion in the second one. Well, she's not there, and he's clearly still got this thing in his head that he hasn't been able to shake. So what did happen? Does it take a while to come up with the tones for each of the succeeding films?
Well, I think the tone is a lot. The stage in life they are, what age they are, what they've been through, so that takes its own tone. This one in their early 40s was the tone of long commitment and a long-term relationship, a partnership. So very different than the little bubbles of the previous two films, these little encounter bubbles. This was
I mean, the tone of it
much more
was
domestic.
yeah.
What we were dealing with.
It's the hardest thing to write, I think, to write about love in a relationship that has been, whatever, 9 years into it, So this film, I think, was a challenge in the writing. To me, at least, it's not a brief encounter or connecting or reconnecting. It's about the one that got away, you actually got the one that got away, you get the one that got away, and then they're at home and they're complaining about the garbage.
Well, what I'm thinking was they would have signed on to this 9 years ago. We kind of find Jesse and Celine in some sort of paradise. They've got these beautiful daughters, they've got careers,
They got what they wanted.
Yeah, so it's kind of what happens when you get what you want. There's still two people maneuvering through the world together, and it's always complex. There's no easy path really.
Well, one of the things I love about it is that scene in the hotel room feels like a play. You can almost stage that as a separate piece because there's so much going on in it that it doesn't need to be connected to anything that's come before in the movies. It just feels so specific and so lived in. And that feels like an incredibly difficult scene to have written. I want you guys to talk about that a little bit.
I would say that was, of all three films, that was the most challenging piece to write. Because, everyone calls it the fight scene and everything, but really the first quarter or third of it is a love scene. It's the first love scene of the trilogy. And we finally see them kiss, we finally see them together. And trying to figure out, Rick used to say this thing to Julie and I all the time, is that throughout this entire scene, everyone is trying not to fight. Everyone's trying to stop the fight. They think the next line will be the last line. It's just they add one more comment, or
They just can't help themselves.
What you say to stop, okay, you're absolutely right, as always. And then it reignites. Even, we stop and decide to have a glass of wine, the fight's over. It reignites. It's so...
Yeah. It's actually, it is a lot of work, but it's also fun to build those different arcs throughout the scene. They're almost going to stop the fight, and then it starts again, and then they're more emotional, then the fights become more about hurting than being angry when she comes back, about feeling misunderstood as a woman and mother and all that. Then it starts into more angry again. It just doesn't stop.
They were hard to write, but they were more fun to play.
Yeah.
What's much harder to play is what Rick asks us through much of the movie, which is not to act.
To act, but that it feels totally, unacted. We've had a long day. I'm so sorry.
No, one of the things that's so great about it, though, is that you, as an audience, don't say that. No, you don't say that. Don't do that. Stop. No, you're supposed to be together now. And it's so dense emotionally because it's in an interesting way, almost like these kind of acting exercises where you're playing one thing, there's this other undercurrent. That's, to me, where it feels like there are actors who work on the script.
That's it. We could create that where we had two things to play all the time.
Yeah, and it's interesting because most actors, the homework of an actor when you get a script is, and when you have to act something, is kind of look into the backstory of the character, kind of create that backstory, and we basically do it together as writers. So our writing feeds our acting work as well.
Previous films feed it. I don't have to, I'm having a fight with, Celine, but I don't have to imagine, wait, when did I first meet her? Oh, I know when I first met her. I played that scene. I saw her. I was wearing a maroon, thank you, turtleneck. And a hole right there. She was sitting over there.
I remember better than him.
She was always the way.
As always, as always.
And all this is part of the fabric. And the odd thing is because we made the films for people that have seen them, they live in the audience's subconscious too. And that's where this experiment becomes really interesting.
But also, I think it's interesting too because there's this sort of constant feeling of suspense when that fight's going on, because it's the first time we've seen you guys together into a situation. No, you can't be those people. You have to.
You were almost there.
Yeah. But there's that sort of idealization that we romanticize seeing couples in movies. So.
There was the guy who's Steadicam operator on the movie. We're doing a scene, and Jesse checks out a young woman running by in a bikini. And we broke for lunch after the thing, and the cameraman said, well, I'm really upset. I'm sorry, what? I have to say, I just found it really upsetting. Why? Jesse wouldn't do that. It's totally innocent. It's just, his wife and he met, after they saw Before Sunrise, and this is an idealized love.
To live up to, it's like,
I spent all lunch going, but the kid, he's a human being, and you're treating him like he's, Jack and Rose from the Titanic. He's a guy, and that's the point of these movies. And finally, a couple, about 6 or 7 days later, okay.
Well, you're talking about something really that comes out of the movies. We feel a sense of ownership of these characters, and because we do idealize women, and the first two movies are really about romance. This is about a relationship, and I wonder if that was something you guys thought. If we got to make this about the meat of this thing of being together, you can't just continue to idealize it. Is that?
Obviously, they couldn't meet again by accident.
No, it's not really age appropriate at 41 to have this encounter. It's like we wanted to jump into the domestic belly of the beast and try to dig around there and see what that had to offer. I mean, that was the question: can that be romantic? It's a tough age to write about. Can that be romantic? And
it's a tough situation. I mean, 9 years into a relationship, kids, twins, living in different, like having the ex-wife in another country, and it's not easy. But life gets more complicated. I think.
Yeah, but we wanted to show that. I mean, that maybe there is romance. It's just as you age, you kind of redefine it. It can't be like it was at 23. There's different elements. You've acquired all this experience, and life has gone on. So we were just determined to, look inside that. I think if it's romantic, it's because they're still communicating. They're still connected. Yeah, we still see that connection, but it's life. The life around them is the problem.
That was a big part of all this too. Is that when people see these movies, they remember where they were in age terms, and they remember what it was like when they saw Before Sunrise for the first time.
Yeah, they're part of a memory, for a lot of people.
Not everybody. I mean, I would imagine there's a lot of people here who haven't seen them. For how many of you are seeing this film and haven't seen the other two? Yeah, see?
Everything all of us.
I like that. I like watching trilogies out of order or films, it works. It works. So,
did it make any sense to you?
I hope so, because that was our goal. We wanted it to stand alone, just like we did the previous film. So.
But there's also this thing that happens so much in your films that I really thought about in that scene in the hotel room. In your movies, people are often fighting to get the last word in. That's like a big thing in your movies.
When you talk, when it's all dialogue, you have a lot of people fighting to get
But I can't think of anybody.
First, last, and middle.
Yeah, but I can't think of anybody else whose conversation is territorial in movies. And people are constantly fighting, even the Newton boys. People are fighting to say the last thing. They want to be the last person murdered. I wonder where that comes from for you.
No, because I'm really like that.
Is he like that guy?
I mean, I'm delusional, but maybe, I think I'm more of a listener than talker. Except for you guys.
One thing about Rick is that he's the immovable force. That I've made several movies with you, and now I feel like I'm on a game show. But no, you're a great listener. I mean, that's part of what our dynamic is as the three of us. But you do know how to put everything in context. And I mean, I would venture to say that Have you ever not gotten the last one? I mean, by listening, you're in turn the one sitting back going, yes, and now it's done. It's kind of like a Native American, I've spoken, over now.
The last part, I get to the...
Yeah, he edits the film. I mean, come on. Julian had a lot of ideas that don't make it. It would have been a lot better.
You actually pass up their cars, they actually write down their own ideas. But you know what I mean by that, Julian? I mean, in these movies, that happens a lot. Where, again, it's so unique to you, that sort of thing of people fighting to be heard and also maintaining their points of view.
Yeah, I mean, when we work, I feel when I work with Richard and Ethan, like, I go into a direction that I would not go with other films I write. Like, I allow myself to write long monologue of people telling stories, like actually narrating, like telling stories, like something you don't do that often in movies, It's very unusual, like we actually tell a story. And then the goal is to write it in a way that, it's entertaining enough and it's natural enough that actually you want to listen like you would like to listen to a friend telling you a story, or someone you know, or someone you love telling you a story. And that's very unique. That's the only, time I go in that way of writing something. And same, in the room, that's what we do,
Most narratives don't have room for that kind of decorative conversation. Most movies are like really tightly structured short stories. Everything's got an advanced character, plot. Everything's moving forward.
Most dialogue, most screenplay. I mean, you can have a quick look at a screenplay. It's like, boom, 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 just one line. I mean, those screenplays are like, like big chunks.
Well, most screenplays have a horizontal element. descriptions. You just turn page after page after page.
Like long,
very vertical. Yeah.
I was teasing Rick about that, but I would actually say that you enjoy dialogue and listening to dialogue, and human beings, and ultimately all of Rick's work is he's interested in humans in a way that most filmmakers are not. And most of us want to be heard and understood. And what he's doing, what you're noticing, is something that is true of all of us. We want to be understood, and we're all always trying to get in the last word. I mean, that's one of our most common notes as actors, is about, actors always talk about listening and stuff, but Rick's always reminding us that, you're not actually listening. From this moment forward, you're planning what you're going to say. And you're waiting for a pause long enough to get it in.
Yeah, actually, a lot of couples don't really listen to each other. They don't, sadly,
But what you were saying, Julie, actually brings up something I was almost going to start with, and I guess I nailed it now. That's in all Rick's movies, and you were getting this too, Ethan. Each of the characters brings his own narrative into it, and there's sort of like these narratives come together. There's a lot of loners who want a space to tell their stories to other people. And now we can see you guys as a couple having like the same narrative, which is really interesting because that creates a whole different kind of tension, doesn't it?
Yeah. Sorry, is it the question? Okay. Yeah. We really, we try to, I don't know, the process of writing those films is very unique, like the way we work together, and we try to bring something to screen that doesn't, it's not a typical film. I mean, I don't know, what would you say to that? I'm sorry, I'm just like...
Well, our writing process, we sit in a room and we tell stories. We make each other laugh. We laugh a lot. We go way out there. And a lot of our time, I think we're listening to the other and we're saying things that the person talking isn't saying it to be in the movie. We're entertaining the other two. And then it's up to the other two to say, that's kind of funny. Let's put that in the movie. It's like, really? That's just some dumb dream I had. What are you talking about? Or, that's something somebody said. So we're always pushing each other and actually extracting things from each other. We're very honest with one another, but it's really fun. We laugh a lot, but the atmosphere is the subject of what that scene or whatever we're working on. But I would say we discard probably 95% of what's brought forward and thinking, this is subject matter for this movie. And the other two kind of go, you know, I don't know, is that interesting? Is that original? Where does that fit? And we don't have any egos about it. We just go, oh, you know, that's okay. Yeah, we'll find somewhere else for that.
Well, we have to agree on everything. I mean, we're not like...
Because it won't work. If I can't put something in that if Julie and Ethan don't feel it, it's not going to work in the film. And if they have something that I don't understand, it's not going to, I can't make it work in the film. So we did this 19 years ago in Vienna. That's always been our working dynamic, is we kind of reworked that script, and I just always felt that for this to work and these characters to be believable, it really has to have gone fully through you guys. So
what's fascinating about watching it too is that in that sequence, in that scene, we realize that because there's been so much drama in the other two movies, I think subconsciously, or maybe consciously as an audience, we're waiting for the other shoe to drop in some way, and what you come to realize is they're in this for the duration. I mean, nobody's going to leave at the end. There's not going to be a separation because we want you to stay together. I think that's why people get so caught up in that, and that tension you create by saying the wrong thing becomes hurtful, and then becomes that sort of territorial thing. But no, I'm going to say the last thing. It becomes I think a really different kind of filmmaking.
Yeah, I mean. It's really, like, building that fight was really interesting. I don't know, I just, but also acting it was so exciting.
It's fun too, and I finally got to say the hateful things to each other that we've been waiting for. We finally got to talk to each other the way we really want to.
I love saying mean things to you.
So many of those mean things in the fight aren't really them saying it to each other. They're things we've all heard in our own lives.
Oh yeah, that's us.
That we get to put in there. But the fight, I mean, how many films have the luxury of a 30-minute fight? You know, so... Sorry. But you know, we got to hit a lot of notes in there. I mean, it goes from serious, confessional, sincere, to really juvenile. Well, you started it.
Yeah.
No, you won't shut up.
You think you're winning?
Yeah, it's on so many levels, but it was really fun kind of plotting that out, you know, the pace of it. It's like its own mini film, but so is the dinner scene, you know, so is a lot of stuff.
The car scene.
Yeah.
This one, the outline of this is really started in a way, these 6 scenes that we're all building towards the fight. I guess building to the resolution.
And everything is very, very scripted, because everything is, we really want to give a balance between the gender, like the male-female balance, like, you know, we want to make multi-dimensional characters also. We don't want them to be, you know, the bad guy that cheated on his wife, or the this and that, you know, like, it's not, like, to try to get away from the typical kind of caricature, or like, kind of like sketch of what characters are, and it's really interesting. I mean, it's like really unique, and we get to do that over like 20 years, you know. It's kind of a, you know, you can go so much deeper into characters if you've like been digging for 20 years into, you know, romantic love and their relationship. And it's like,
well, there's so many kind of packed contrivances that are parts of romantic melodrama, romantic comedy, and you guys just have to fight really hard to sort of stay away from all of this.
Yeah, and actually the last scene to me was the hardest, like, as an actress, because that last scene I felt like if I mean, we did rehearsal where I was like crying much more and stuff, and then I realized, I thought to myself, if we go that far into the crying, I think there's a point of no return and you get into a melodramatic kind of mode. Like, it had to be painful, but still, because the humor comes back at the end. And so you can't go too far into the melodrama in that scene either. So finding the right balance is really what, you know, what was the
we have the luxury at the time, though. We have a couple years to really think about it in general, and then we have all those weeks of script, workshop, rehearsal, and shooting. So we can work through all the first impressions, all the cliches. That we go through every romantic cliche we had in here, but we got rid of it somewhere along the way, you know, because, you know, we have the time to do that. You know, a lot of times if you're in a hurry, you think it's a good idea, but 6 months later, that idea we thought was working, we go, you know, that's kind of boring, let's not do that. Let's go in another direction, so we have that luxury, because we're taking our time.
Was it last scene tough for you as well?
You know, for me, yeah, the other two movies had a very clear end note. You know, the first one being, okay, we've agreed not to see each other again, it's going to be fun, romantic, but then at the end, the hurt of that, say goodbye to the train, and the second one is a very clear ending, in they're finally alone together, and it's very clear. But this one, what is the tone of it? You know, and if it's too happy, if it's too sad, does the tone of it tell you they're going to break up? Does the tone of it tell you they're going to be together? And if it was any one thing too clear, it's very difficult for us to find them. And you know, the fight has to get to some very serious. I mean, she leaves telling him, you know, what I'm trying to say is, I'm not sure I love you anymore. Those are big words, very scary words, and we needed to treat those words with respect. And at the same time, there's a very, my favorite moment of that last scene out on the water there is I say, can I sit down? When I first walk up, and she says, no, you can't sit here, I'm an angry person, I hurt people I love, and I hurt her. And, you know, she repeats what he said to her, and he says, oh, just my type. And for me, that's the essential mood shift that makes it work, which is it, I know you're fucked up and human, and I know I'm fucked up and human, but I love it that way. You know, and we can do, you know, nobody's perfect, and that's the dance that Jesse and Celine are in. They're each, he's manipulative, they each have their problems, but their problems are what make them attractive also. And without one, you don't have the other. And so that end scene, I don't know, I really like it.
We have in mind an audience that would appreciate kind of the ugly honesty of some of this. You know, I think in a lot of romantic comedies, if you build this kind of artifice, that the truth of all of our lives, if that entered in, say the notion of infidelity or something, it just, that structure can't support that. The whole thing.
Yeah, because when everything is like, it's like a Disneyland kind of world, and then suddenly someone cheats, it's like evil, you know what I mean? But when you feel real,
Yeah, the real world in a long-term relationship, that actually happens quite a bit. And
70%.
And we weren't afraid. We were a little you know, when you look at those things that say,
number, you told me that number.
But no, we do go through that, like, oh, well, that they will be disliked if this plus this equals an unlikable character. We kind of go, yeah, but...
It's talking about people responding to a situation because there aren't characters, but you guys are built characters.
Yeah, so I think our structure, what we've tried to build, maybe can withstand that dissonant note, you know, like, ooh, it's a little real, a little edgy. Maybe I don't want to know that, but it's real, and the structure we're trying to build can withhold that, you know, maybe.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question I'm sure you haven't asked enough, and I'll start with you. Where do you see these guys in 9 years?
You know, I mean, that's the... If you'd asked, the three of us sat at a rap party in Vienna in 1994. You know, the World Cup was going on. Yeah. It was, if you had said to us then, we would still be here talking to Jesse and Celine almost 20 years later, I would have never believed you. What would we... So
you said you were a time traveler.
Going to tell us that we're still going to be talking about these guys 20 years from now.
So I had no idea. And in fact, what I think one of the things that's made this special is how accidental it's been. There was no grand plan. If you had this plan to make this movie that spans, you know, visit characters at different points, something would have been fake or wrong about it. It's Jesse and Celine keep rising in our consciousness, and they have something to say, and at a certain point that will end. You know? Please let it be now. I want to go home.
You're going to give me an end. Let's thank these guys.